Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, next week is a very, very big week in the annual calendar, which is the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly, or rather, the opening of the United Nations General Assembly, and every foreign dignitary gets to say whatever they get to say. There's some banalities and platitudes. Very rarely anything comes out of that.
I think for New Yorkers, it's the worst week in the calendar.
It is absolutely. It's a horrific week in New York because, of course, the traffic is throughout the city for a week is completely ensnared. You know, no one can get anywhere in the city, and but sometimes, the heads of state show up and say whatever it is they feel is so important for them to say. One of the heads of state who will be in attendance in New York will be Zelensky. And President Zelensky, who really isn't a president in any meaningful sense of
former president. At the very best, he's former president.
He's a former president.
That's exactly the kindest thing you can say.
The kindest thing, exactly. Yeah, former president. He has no legitimacy as president. Will deliver his remarks, and then he will meet President Biden. He will also meet Vice President Kamala Harris, and maybe, that hasn't been confirmed yet, he will also meet former President Trump. And Zelensky very grandly will announce, in vague terms before the United Nations, his victory plan. And then he will give the specifics of the victory plan to Biden, and presumably Harris, and presumably Trump. So this is very interesting because up until now, we had been talking about the peace plan, which everyone had sworn to. The Zelensky peace plan, NATO. Yeah, we support the Zelensky peace plan. And the peace plan, the 10-point peace plan was essentially Russian capitulation. And Russians turning themselves in for an international criminal tribunal. So that was all part of the peace plan. But now there's this called the victory plan. And the victory plan is the preliminary to the peace plan. So this is so Zelensky will be saying, well, this is what needs to be done in order to get to the peace plan. Now, his victory plan reads like a kind of a wish list, a kind of Santa Claus wish list. What would you like Santa Claus to bring you this Christmas? And so well, obviously he wants all restrictions on the firing of missiles, long-range missiles, lifted. He wants lots and lots of air defense systems, he wants
a fast-tracked entry into NATO, fast-track entry into the EU.
Yep, that's it. So that's all part of the peace plan.
And we got the best one, the best one here. $1 trillion in cash.
That's right.
Do whatever they want to do with it. $1 trillion.
That's right. He's just been given 35 billion alone 35 billion from Ursula von der Leyen.
Cash, everyone.
Exactly. But this money is all Russian money. This is all from the frozen $300 billion of frozen Russian assets. That's where this 35 billion is coming from. Flagrantly illegal. But he's got this. That's a nice chunk of 35 billion alone. It's they're gonna...
I can well imagine in his presidential residence that he has a huge empty room for pallets of €100 bills. Okay,
right.
He ain't dealing with Bitcoin. Okay, he wants hard cash. Okay,
that's right. So the question then is, why is he doing this now? And what is the likely response? I mean, my feeling is that he's seeing the Biden administration. It's got 4 months before it's out the door, or three months before it's out of the door, and seeing that this team is not going to be kept on. Whoever's going to be president, they're not going to keep this team on.
Why would they?
Why would they? Exactly. I mean, so therefore, the issue is, do they just want to say, okay, we're just going to dump a whole lot of problems on whoever comes next and say, okay, you deal with this. So basically, they may just sign off on whatever they can sign off to Zelensky. Hey, go get it. Do what you want with it. We're not going to be here for much longer. What's your take, Peter?
I think there's a number of takes on it here. None of them very serious, I think. I think the broad outlines of what you just said here, this administration is coming to an end. The Biden administration is the owner, the architect, and the execution. I was going to say executioner, but yeah, I guess in a way they are the executioners of the Ukraine project. So there is kind of a bookending going on here right now. And Zelensky this is basically in your face. I mean, you said you want to punish Russia. Well, here's the recipe to do it. Okay, we know you don't give a fig about us. You don't give a fig about the future of Ukraine, its society, its population, its demographics. But we're going to keep you to your word. I mean, this victory plan goes after Russia, and if that's what you want, and that's what you've said from the very beginning, okay, here it is. Okay, now, what's going on in Ukraine, there's a lot of machinations as usual, because the end is nigh. George and I have admitted this for a long time. We don't know exactly what that means. We're the honest ones on this topic. We're not last legists.
Right.
But Zelensky, this is a fantasy unicorn list. And there are those that are saying, well, it's going to be rejected, obviously, out of hand, and not directly verbally, we'll take it on board. These are good starting points, the same nonsense, okay? Because it'll be in, what is it, Abu Dhabi or Dubai, they're supposed to.
You're talking about the peace conference?
Yeah,
the peace conference, okay.
Okay, so this is a fundamental building block. They'll say all this kind of nonsense, okay? The Russians aren't going to go to it, so it's the same ending. But there are some that are saying that Zelensky wants this to fail because it'll give him an opportunity to say, well, we've run out of gas, we're out of rope, we have to talk to the Russians. I don't believe that for a second.
I don't.
Okay?
I'm not buying that.
No, this is being circulated around as a conspiracy theory. But I mean, I suppose, George, I'll throw it back to you. I mean, what else can he do?
Well, I think, he in this bizarre world that he and his cohorts inhabit, they want to keep this war going. I mean, it's obviously a good grip for them, whatever the cost that it is to Ukraine, and the Americans can hardly believe their good fortune that they've got such idiots. Yes. As clients who are ready to commit national suicide. I mean, literal national suicide. I mean, it's like a demographic suicide for the American agenda. The American agenda, which has always been to degrade, demoralize, deplete Russia, try and kill as many Russians as possible. Try to knock Russia out as any kind of a geopolitical competitor, make sure that there's no kind of partnership between Russia and Europe possible for decades. And Ukraine is a wonderful tool for achieving it. And so therefore, why not give him what he wants, like lifting the restrictions. Now, I don't think they're going to make a public announcement. I think they will lift the restrictions, but they won't make a public announcement of it, because if they make a public announcement, then that could lead to a serious crisis. But I think if they say, okay, just go ahead and do it. Again, if things get really bad, as a result with Russia, these people are not going to be around. They're going to say, hey, well, this is, it's their problem. It'll be a Harris problem or a Trump problem. It's not going to be a Biden problem. He's going to be on the beach somewhere. Blinken will be somewhere else. It's going to be whoever is in the White House will be their problem. So I think they will give Zelensky what is feasible for them to do. I think lifting the restrictions is, I think, the minimum. And I think it's an easy thing to do. I mean, the French and the British are begging them to do it. Oh, please, please, please lift the restrictions. So yeah, sure, lift the restriction. Well, if things turned out badly, it's going to be a problem for the whoever's next in.
George and I, we've talked about this many, many times. I think, again, it'll be unspoken. Of course, they're going to do it. They've done everything else, okay? But you have to get to the material world here. I mean, just how many of these missiles can the French and the British actually give them? Okay, I think it's quite limited at the end of the day. But it doesn't have to take a public announcement for the Russians to act or not to act. So that creates a lot of dangerous ambiguity. Okay, because like, oh, out of the blue,
Right.
the Russians, it'll never be contextualized. Everything is in a vacuum.
Right.
This is how these people operate.
Right.
But I agree with George because they're Trump-proofing it. Okay, the one thing they want for sure. There's only one thing for sure that you can count on. You can go to the bank on, is that they want this conflict to continue into January of next year. That's what they want. Okay.
That's right.
And also, George and I have gone back and forth a lot on this issue, but why wouldn't they do that? Because if you look at the incrementalism that the Russians have pursued in liberating the Donbass, everyone. This is September 22nd, 2024, 2.5 years. The Donbass has not been completely liberated. Yep. Okay. Kherson has not been liberated, even though it's part of, as far as the Russians are concerned, it's a constituent part of the Russian Federation. It's not completely liberated.
No.
So, I mean, if you look at it, okay, obviously these people in Kiev and in Washington and London are just heartless bastards. They're just destroying an entire generation of young men. Don't give it a thought, okay? But the Russians, irrespective of what the West does, the Russians keep doing what they're doing, and they're reading that Russian strategy and say, "Hey, we've got some bandwidth here. I mean, we've definitely got some bandwidth. Okay, we're gonna lose a lot more people. Okay, and we're gonna lose 4 or 5 tanks a day. We're gonna lose 15 trucks a day. Let's to the. We could keep doing this for who knows, maybe another half year."
Yeah.
I mean, that's the level of cynicism.
It's a level of cynicism, and that's really the thing with both the Americans and the British and the French is they're actually very good at fighting proxy wars, because proxy wars is good for business, and you're not getting shot yourself. So therefore, all you have to do is just to keep it going. Just keep fueling it, preventing any kind of a peaceful resolution. And in the moment there's any talk of negotiations, you immediately move in to thwart any possibility of any peaceful outcome. And then you just continue it. And the Americans and British have become very good at it. The one thing is the danger. They don't want to get sucked in themselves. They don't want to start getting shot at themselves. That's a tricky one, because then that's going to become very unpopular very quickly in their own countries.
And we're in tricky territory
exactly.
Right now. That's why this is very tricky territory to be in right now. But I mean, Russia and NATO, they actually have kind of the same. They look at the same picture and draw different conclusions. So Russians are saying, well, we've had setbacks. There's always setbacks in military conflicts, but on the whole, in toto, we're achieving the goals that we want. Forever, maybe very, very slowly, and it's a long slog, but we're achieving the goals that we set out for. But the West can say, well, 2.5 years in, Ukraine's, well, it's still standing. I mean, so we must be doing something right. See, this is where we are.
That's right. I just want to give you a sample of some of the commentary, from people that I think you're quite familiar with.
Did you see Boris Johnson's piece in the Spectator?
Yeah, that's what I want to show you. Boris Johnson's piece, and I also want to show you Timothy Garton Ash.
Oh, one of our favorites.
Yes, exactly. One of these,
the ultimate lightweight.
The ultimate lightweight, who is continually awarded. He's always winning an award for something or other. Utterly, a vapid figure, but he's turned this into a very successful and lucrative career. So here he is touting this in The Guardian. Zelensky has a game-changing plan to win peace. For it to work, Biden must back it. So he's already using Zelensky's formulation, game-changing plan. Biden must back it. So the Biden has to, immediately fast. Has to be fast.
How many times in this conflict has Ukraine said that there's a game changer ahead? Okay.
Yes.
over and over and over
Over.
again.
And each time, they've said this, Garton Ash has gone into print to declare, yeah, this is a game changer. And he always snarling at some wimpy, weak, feeble, pusillanimous Western politician, whether it's Scholz or the Biden or whoever, Macron, or who somehow appears to be wringing his hands or shuffling his feet and sort of biting his fingernails. No, enough of this, willy weakness and pusillanimous pussyfooting. Let's just give this. Let's give the tanks. Let's give the these medium range missiles. Let's lift the restrictions. He's always doing it. It's absolute consistency. He's always doing this. But he himself, of course, is always not in the fight. He's never, he doesn't have a backpack on, and he doesn't have a rifle in his hands.
And that's emblematic in this title. Biden must back it fast.
Biden, exactly. So here he says, Ukrainian leaders are making a new pitch, having for 2 years talked only of total victory, defined as recovering all the country's territory in the frontiers, blah, blah. And they now speak of reaching a position where Ukraine can negotiate from strength. There's nothing at all new about this, because this has been repeated ad nauseum by Stoltenberg, who always advocates more and more aid for Ukraine, because that's going to put us into a strong negotiating position. We must be in a strong negotiating position, because only Putin will only respect us when we are in a strong negotiating position.
Didn't they say that with the counteroffensive?
Yeah, exactly. So that's right.
We're backing the counteroffensive. General Petraeus, Victoria Nuland, this was like, in the bag. This is a done deal, okay? Timothy Garton Ash, he's a lot of things, but he's not original. But anyway.
No, not absolutely not original. But the thing is, it never made any sense, because if you say, if that's your exclusive strategy, you don't have any war objectives or anything, it's just to get yourself into a stronger negotiating position, then you're never going to be in that position, because the moment you win, let's say you win a couple of tactical battles, do you say, yep, that's it, now we're in a strong negotiating position, let's go for it? No, let's win a few more battles, and then we'll be in an even stronger position. They've always done that. It's like a gambler who says, what, you've won a little bit, why don't you just leave the table now? No, I won a little bit, now I'm going to go and win a little bit more. So that's always like, oh no.
Yeah, and also, George, built into that ridiculous assumption is that the Russians would enter negotiations.
Right.
They won't.
Right. That's exactly right. Unlike many in the West, however, they understand that the only way to get there is to turn the tide on the battlefield. Here we go. To knock Goliath sharply back on his heels, if not his ass. So he uses the English version of it. A Central Asian leader who knows Putin well was asked by a Western interlocutor whether the Russian president will negotiate. Yes, came the prompt reply, when his generals tell him he's losing. That's very strange, because there's no evidence for that. I mean, it's like it's just not in the Russian character. I mean,
you can go through the various iterations of Russia. We can go with imperial, we can go with the Civil War, we can go with the Bolsheviks, we can go to the Soviet Union, we can go to the Russian Federation. George is absolutely right. It's something that has never happened. And it's the same societal set of variables. It may have a different political coloration from time to time, but there's nothing there. And my sense is, unlike what Zelensky and his crowd is doing, we really don't know what kind of relationship Putin has with the generals. It's never cast in that way. No. My sense is that he sets out the basic goals and wants updates. And if you can't, if you need this, we'll get you this. So if you need this, to me, it looks more, he's much more like an FDR type character.
I agree. I think he's very much a hands-off type of leader.
And a big picture guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he obviously doesn't think that he's a military expert, so he doesn't get involved in the minutiae of battles because he just doesn't think he knows enough. And there, I think he's different from Stalin, who did get into the minutiae of battles. Different from Churchill, different from Hitler. I mean, but you're right. It's more like FDR, who did get intervene and just didn't leave it to generals. But Putin, I think, leaves it to the generals. He doesn't. He really doesn't.
Yeah, and and with Stalin, it was hit and miss.
Yeah,
Okay,
hit and miss, as with others.
and that's an
Churchill's mostly
understatement.
miss. Churchill
Mostly miss, mostly miss.
exactly. Churchill almost always got it wrong, and the generals were right.
Well, I mean, someone like Stalin, and George is right. He did involve himself in the highest levels of decision making, but the kind of decision making is like, I'm going to get this general to work against this general, and who
Right,
can liberate Berlin first. Okay,
right,
that's the level of his military.
right,
He politicized the military
right,
process.
right.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yep. And then that's what Zelensky has in mind when he told the Yalta European Strategy Conference. That's the thing that was started by Viktor Pinchuk, who is this
Yeah.
very strange Ukrainian oligarch, very, very shady character. But he launched this thing called the Yalta European Strategy. And interestingly enough, he had that that YES conference in September 2013, really just before Maidan, where I think the outlines of the plan for Maidan was worked out. But Pinchuk is like a lot of these oligarchs. It's kind of like Kolomoisky and others are kind of he plays both sides of the street. Because back
He
in
always makes somebody else pay for it.
exactly, because back in 2015, Pinchuk wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal calling for a peace, basically a settlement between Ukraine and Russia. Basically, Ukraine should give up on Crimea, give up on the Donbass. I mean, Pinchuk was attacked for it. He never repeated it, but nonetheless, he wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal in 2015 saying, "Hey, let's just bring this war to an end." We don't know what motivates him. I suspect it's always money at the bottom
Well,
of
I
it.
mean, with all of these guys, you remember Poroshenko was, I think he's still embroiled in a scandal where there was some kind of coal, buying coal to burn in your furnace from the Donbass. Of course, it was sanctioned and all that. He has business interests in the east, in the west, the north, in the south.
Exactly.
And all of these guys do, okay? And why should a war get involved, interrupt my business? Okay.
That's right. That's
I
exactly.
think Poroshenko, he's lost all of his assets in Russia. I think they're finally gone.
Is that right? He's lost all his assets. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean that. And what's interesting is that Pinchuk is a very shady character, and yet all these people, all kinds of distinguished people, big names in the world. I wouldn't say distinguished. I think it's just big names, big kind of celebrity foreign policy types. They all go to these events that Pinchuk organizes. I mean, I guess it's a free trip. Free
You
hotel.
never know what you're going to get when you drag $100 dollar bill through a trailer park. James Carville, everyone.
That's right, exactly. Anyway, so there was Zelensky had in mind when he told the CS conference that we need a game changer to make Russia make peace. And as the UN General Assembly meets in New York, Zelensky will personally present his plan to Biden. Personally, that's right. Well, thank you very much. This exactly carries it. Well, top of the list.
And we'll give a matching pen. Okay.
Exactly. This is such great such great honor to be bestowed upon me. This is my bill. Here is my bill.
Yes, it's like Moses with the 10 Commandments.
Yes,
okay.
that's right. It's my
Hey,
10
I wouldn't be surprised if it was on a tablet. What do you think, George?
Yes. Top of the list is getting American permission to use Western missiles, including British Storm Shadow missile, which have US targeting technology to strike more of the sites in Russia from which attacks originate. Many lives could have been saved if this had been given sooner. He always says this, and he's always saying this. You have no basis whatever for saying this, but you always say, "Whoa, if only you'd done this, we could have won the war and been marched onto Moscow."
But see, Timothy Gardnash, he's not a very deep thinker.
No,
How do you know that? Maybe many more lives would have been lost
of
by
course,
doing.
exactly, absolutely.
Hang on, John. I'm going to turn on a light. Keep
Okay,
going. Go.
okay.
Go ahead. Keep reading.
Okay. And then Gartnash goes on, we don't know all the details of the Zelensky plan, but besides those deep strikes, it will probably include a request for sustained funding. Of course it will. After the year's long delayed US congressional vote of $61 billion runs out. So, so 61 billion, that's run out pretty quickly, right? Oh, it's going to run out. So we want how does it put it? A request for sustained funding. So just keep that money flowing. So remember, this is, he will personally hand this plan, he will personally hand the list of demands to Biden.
Which were written in the State Department.
That's right, exactly. Tighten sanctions on Russia. So we need to tighten them even more. And its Chinese and Indian enablers. Plus the use of frozen Russian assets held in the West for Ukrainian reconstruction. I love the reconstruction. There's no reconstruction going on. And it doesn't even make any sense to have any reconstruction while there's a war going on. I mean,
I think this is probably, Russian assets held in the West for Ukraine, for some Ukrainians to construct villas in the West. But I'm sorry, that's what they call it.
I think so. And a bold bid for the shield of NATO membership.
Could it be different, George? Could it be different? Bold.
Yes, to cover the roughly 4/5 of Ukraine's sovereign territory that Kiev actually controls. But you see, the interesting thing is, I mean, Biden will say, yeah, I support this. I'm for it. But it doesn't really matter because you still have to get everybody else on board. Now, yeah, and many NATO members say, yeah, we want Ukraine, but a number are going to say no. I mean, it's exactly the same as before. I mean, you've made this pitch before. It's not like you haven't asked before. You've asked many times before, immediate entry into NATO, and the response is always the same. Basically, you don't have everybody on NATO agreeing to this.
Yeah, well, and a lot of them also, a lot of them, you could say, I think that Voronezh, the city of Voronezh, should be part of Ukraine, and they'll say, "Yeah, that's a good idea."
Number of them
have to do for it. Okay. Yes. Again, everybody, that's why a lot of these countries joined the supper club called NATO. They never expected they have to do anything.
No.
All of these careerists, my next job, honey, I'm going to be representing Slovakia, NATO headquarters. And then, the next step, I'll be deputy vice defense minister. And then maybe I'll be prime minister in 15. It's just all of these layers. And I know this. A lot of these Eastern European countries are, well, we didn't sign up to do anything.
No, of course not. And they won't do anything. I mean, that's the point. They're not going to do anything. I mean, what are the Baltics going to do? I mean, these are tiny countries. They're smaller than most, American cities. I mean, what are they going to do in any war? And so that's all of this is just something. Yeah, we'll just get the Americans to do it for us, so they can sort of shake their fists. We're ready, to fight the Russians.
It's really, we don't know all the details, but Timothy Gardnash is trying to sound like some kind of sage. Well, Timothy Gardnash, you're like the 150th person that has said this. Okay. I mean, it's not like you have any special knowledge here. You may wordsmith it a little bit better than others, but there's no real
you're absolutely right. They're doing it in this. Oh, this is very secret. Oh, this is really very very top secret. Well, we know all this. I mean, Ukraine has made these demands before, and then there've been innumerable news stories precisely outlining all of this. And the Gartner said, "Well, we don't know all the details. That's it's still a top secret what these details are. Everybody knows what they are. Yeah, because Zelensky has made these demands many times before. There are two problems with this plan. Two. Okay, two. Only two. First, Biden's entire track record suggests he's likely to give only a fraction of what Zelensky asks. Well, we don't know what kind of a condition Biden really is in.
Okay, but a fraction, I mean, 9/10 is a lot.
9/10 is a fraction. But I mean, as we saw at this recent cabinet meeting, Biden basically ceded this to his wife. So his wife was actually conducting the cabinet meeting. So we don't actually even know whether Biden will actually be compos mentis, when he talks to Zelensky. Maybe it'll be Jill who'll be.
Maybe Hunter. Hunter has been
Maybe
useful.
Hunter. Maybe Hunter will be deciding these things.
And he's going to say, Burisma didn't write me my last check. Could you look?
Yeah, he's going to raise that issue with Zelensky. There's a kind of a check missing.
Check.
Yeah, I guess.
And it's been a while. Can you maybe interest on that last check? Here's the banking coordinates.
It's a kind of a variant on Trump's call with Zelensky when they talk about, can you just find out what the hell the Bidens were up to in New York? So this time, he said Zelensky, well, I'm kind of missing this check. It's really, really annoying when that happens.
See this light, we're leaving soon.
Exactly. And it says there's a fierce argument inside his administration about the deep strikes. Future funding would depend on Congress. He is certainly not committed to NATO membership for any part of Ukraine. Incrementalism for fear of escalation has been a hallmark of the entire handling of the war by this president and his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. Again,
isn't it really interesting, George? Okay, and I'm not trying to defend Biden here because Biden is the epicenter of this fiasco here.
Right.
It's people like Timothy Garton-Ash, General Petraeus, all these other loudmouth airbags, Well, if I was president, I would. But you're not president.
That's
okay.
Right. That's
right. It's always so easy to push people to make decisions where you have no responsibility for.
Exactly.
Well, I'm just a writer. I just write articles.
That's it. You're absolutely. And the worst. No. I mean, I was going to say the British are the worst. These British journalists and columnists are the worst. They're among the worst. But there are American columnists like so who are always urging tough action, urging, well, time to unleash the bombers, time to send the missiles, time to send the tanks. But they're okay, they'll continue enjoying the good life in Manhattan, in London, in Oxford, peacefully, eating their dinners, going to bed every night in a comfy bed in a nice, comfy house. It's disgusting. It really is just absolutely disgusting when people are doing this whole tough guy routine when you're not the one at any time who's sacrificing anything.
Also, he has certainly not committed to NATO membership for any part of Ukraine. Well, if you look on the requirements for entry of a country into NATO, is that they cannot have territorial disputes with their neighbors. Okay, so Timothy Garton-Ash maybe is oblivious to that, or he doesn't want to mention it. But continuously we see Western institutions breaking their own rules. Okay. Right. And determining what freedom of speech means, okay? Right. Well, what security means, okay? Right. It's always one-sided and it's not multifaceted. And this mindset here is that we can do what we do because we're virtuous people. Right. Right. When you look at the 20th century, where have most of the wars started? Who started most of the wars? Okay, the virtuous people, really?
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. So NATO went into this whole routine I think it was about 1995 when they drafted this long document about the criteria for membership. They were trying to get people were a little uncomfortable about bringing all these East European states into NATO, so they had to provide this justification. Whoa, we're not being belligerent. We're not starting any wars. There's certain conditions that any aspiring member states have to fulfill. There are these conditions, which is they can't be involved in any dispute. They can't have any disputes on their territory. Very, very strict. And of course, as always, these rules go, straight out of the window. And this is what they do. I mean, they've been pushing to get Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo into NATO. They know perfectly well they all have this ongoing disputes, but they're still pushing to get them in. So the only reason they haven't got them in is that the Serbs have been obdurate.
Well, George, what rationale they'll use now, and I've already heard it. Well, if we get them all into NATO, then it will resolve all their differences.
It will resolve
over and over again.
Yep,
okay, so right. Here we go from you can't enter an alliance because you still have territorial disputes with your neighbors, and then some smart ass comes up, hey, why don't we just roll them all in, and then we'll say, look, they're all in NATO,
That's
and
right.
because they're in NATO, their territorial disputes have been resolved. That is absolutely illogical. They do it.
That's it. I agree. That's absolutely right. And then all the more reason for the Vice President Kamala Harris, who will inherit this major geopolitical challenge if she becomes president, and all those European allies who understand what's at stake, to urge Biden to leap over his own shadow and make the potentially game-changing moves now. Game-changing moves. No restrictions. Lift all restrictions on the use of this missile. I don't know what I think it's just saying that Biden is so pusillanimous, he's so wimpy and weak, and so reluctant to give Ukraine what it wants. That's it. So he needs to jump over his shadow.
I guess it must be a British thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the idea is
Jung, he talked about the shadow. And the shadow was what you were supposed to control, okay? Because human beings are very aggressive, okay? And your shadow is saying, yeah, do it. And you're saying, no, that could put me in danger, okay? Oh, but it could be so much more fun. I mean, this is Jungian psychology right here. And it's the shadow you have to be worried about, okay? You got to control the shadow, okay? I don't know.
I was always under the impression that what that meant was that, when you see your shadow, is that you get nervous because you think somebody's following you. You have to jump over your shadow. You have to sort of overcome the fear that this shadow is somebody kind of behind you, following you.
See, nobody wants to admit in this circle of hell is that none of them ever thought it would get to this point. Right. Okay. They thought the threat of sanctions would be enough. And now, and you see that with Victoria Nuland, it's just that, well, the Russians didn't do what we expected them to do, what they should have done. And now they're holding these very low cards.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And it's it's extremely dangerous for Russia on top of it.
Right. I wonder if Victoria Nuland is planning to be Secretary of State under Kamala Harris. I wonder if that's her plan.
Oh, I suppose Kamala Harris is going to want to have an all-female cabinet.
Yeah, so I think so too. I think it's going to be
Victoria Nuland's got women. A shot.
Yeah, I think Victoria Nuland, is well in line for that slot.
Maybe that's where that smirk came from during that interview, because everyone, look, as disastrous as Victoria Nuland has been, particularly when it comes to the issue of Ukraine, she can turn around and be a Timothy Garton-Ash, say, yeah, he didn't follow what I asked him to do.
Yeah.
And we'll get it right. That's what she's going to do.
Oh, yeah.
That's what she says at cocktail parties, George.
That's it. Yeah, no question. I think she'll say, and it's probably true, that, hey, I was more belligerent than anyone. I didn't want any hesitation. I didn't want any restrictions, and they were continually stepping on my ideas. Blinken, it was, he just wasn't ready to go there. Biden wasn't ready to go there. That's why I had to leave. She's we know about her belligerence. We still go back to that telephone call from 2014. She was absolutely brazen. We got to overthrow this government.
Let's say the truth. She's an amazing operator. Okay. I can stand back and say, she got a lot of what she wanted. This, you can say George and I have called it Biden's war and all that. That's true. But no, this is the brainchild of Victoria Nuland. It's really quite amazing what she was able to, quote unquote, achieve.
That's right. And that this may be the last chance to enable Ukraine to achieve something that can plausibly be called victory, which is the precondition for a lasting peace. Otherwise, Kiev will probably be forced to sue for a cessation of hostilities sometime next year, negotiating from a position of weakness. That would not be peace.
But what is that? This may be the last chance to enable Ukraine to achieve something that can be plausibly called victory. Well, what is that? Can you define
Exactly.
plausibly called victory?
You're absolutely right. He never spells it out. What exactly is this victory? Because it's all becomes a circular argument. The victory is to get you into a stronger negotiating position. That's victory. Negotiating position to achieve what? What exactly is your negotiating position that you want to be stronger? So he's saying here, well, that's that this will be precondition that will plausibly called victory. Well, what's the victory? The victory is that you've got a negotiations. That's what he's saying. That's victory, that you're now sitting at the negotiating table.
Well, and it's kind of lame to say can plausibly. That seems ambiguous to me. I mean, so it's something is you could call victory, but someone else wouldn't call victory.
Right.
I mean, you trying to put lipstick on a pig here?
Right. That's it. That would not be peace, just a pause before another round of war. In Ukraine, there would be despair and fury. Despair and fury. There's no despair and fury about losing tens of thousands of lives. That's okay. There'd be despair and fury that you haven't achieved all of your wartime objectives.
Would it be despair and fury that you didn't kill off an entire generation?
The entire population, yeah. In the Kremlin, rejoicing, and in the rest of the world, most consequentially of all, swirling contempt for the weakness of the West.
The swirling contempt for the idiocy and hubris of the West, not weakness.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's Garton Ash, and then this is what you were talking about, Boris Johnson. One of the most loathsome human beings, probably alive today. Hard to think of, anyone more loathsome, because at least Nuland, I think, kind of believes certain things. I mean, she's a hater, absolutely hates Russians. Johnson, I think, just loves money. I mean, I think with him, I don't think he really believes anything other than how do I get as much money as possible to live as lavish a life as possible and to pay for the, I don't know how many offspring he has, whatever, 6 or 7. Nobody really knows exactly how many children he actually has, but obviously that's all costing him quite a bit of money. So everything with him is about, how can I parlay my very existence into lots and lots of moolah. So this is an article in the Spectator, and the headline is, "It's time to let Ukraine join NATO." And then it says, "What's the holdup with Storm Shadow and the permissions to use them against Putin's bases within Russia? Can we please all stop babbling this tired old rubbish about escalation and the so-called fear of provoking Putin? That argument has been mounted at every stage in the past 3 years, and at every stage it has been disproved by events." And that's all.
But no, he's absolutely wrong. Is that the Russians warned that they would conduct a special military operation if their demands were not met. You know what, George? They did it.
They did it. Yeah.
They did it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And again, it's always a fallacy to say that, well, because somebody hasn't done something or other yesterday, that means he's not going to do it today and we're not going to do it tomorrow. You don't know that. The different circumstances will call for different actions. You haven't actually before talked about actually launching missiles inside Russian territory, which is what that would entail, which is what we're talking about. There's a NATO actually bombing Russian territory. That's a little bit more than other things that you've recklessly approved of. And to suggest that, oh, well, that's all just bluster, that isn't gonna happen. Well, what if it does? What are you gonna do then? What's the plan, Boris?
Also, there's a built-in assumption that people like Boris Johnson know how the Russians define their own national security. That's a fallacy. He doesn't know. Okay.
Right.
I mean, he's giving you a bad algebra here, because the variables can be different, understood by different people to mean different things. That's dangerous.
That's right. That's right. And then it says, I remember getting warnings from the UK system about the risk of escalation when we sent the NLO missiles just before Putin invaded, though in fact the weapons were of vital assistance to the Ukrainians in immobilizing Russian tanks. People made the very argument about sending Western tanks against sending planes, against sending missile systems of all kinds, and yet the outcome was always the same.
I'm not sure I understand his logic, because all of the above said were destroyed.
Right, they were destroyed. But again, you know, you've done all this. It was always a reckless act. But when people act recklessly, you don't really tell them, hey, why don't you go on and do something even more reckless? You know, like, you know, you're driving 90 miles an hour in the, you know, in a crowded street, and you haven't had any accidents yet. So why don't you just go, you know, at 100 miles an hour? You know, I mean, why, you know, nothing's happened before, you know, let's go at 100 miles an hour.
Exactly.
And then Putin's bluster and saber rattling turned out to be nonsense, because in reality, he's the one who fears escalation. Indeed, one of the very reasons the Ukrainians have been able to mount their astonishing operation in Kursk is that after more than 6 months of agonizing delay in Congress, the $60 billion of US supplemental assistance is finally getting through. So that's the $60 billion. It was like Kursk operation. That's what you needed the $60 billion for. Well, that's a good that's a good use of money. $60 billion for that. And again,
yeah, well, I mean, it was reasons for the Ukrainians have been able to mount an astonishingly foolish operation in Kursk.
Right, because at this stage, it's hard to see what they've achieved by it. I mean, they've made losses, and you know, obviously they've lost men, they've lost armor, and it hasn't really, in any way, given them any military advantage. What's the military advantage? What have they gained as a result of the Kursk operation? So is that the 60 billion? That's what you're going
money well spent. Money
well spent. But again, that's the thing about Johnson, is that this is a very, very lucrative gig for him. I mean, you know, this is somebody who's very much you know, making himself useful to all the military contractors, well, that you know, by being more belligerent than anyone else. And then he goes on, if you are truly worried about escalation, then imagine what happens if Ukraine loses this war, because that is when things really would begin to escalate. Ukraine won't lose, but if it did, we would have the risk of escalation across the whole periphery of the former Soviet Empire, including the border with Poland, wherever Putin thought that aggression would pay off. This is just total fantasy. This is absolutely ludicrous.
Well, okay, again, at the risk of repeating myself, 2.5 years in, the Donbass has not been completely liberated from Ukrainian/NATO forces. And then Poland is next on the menu? What?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
None.
And it's very obvious to me, and again, George and I have differed over the years about this. You know, it's not about land. It's not about territory. Well, it's slow. The slow pace of the Russian advance is doing exactly what it wanted to do: grind down the Ukrainian military. You know, 1,000 men a day, 2,000 men a day, day after day, day after day. And it accumulates, okay? So what, you know, Boris Johnson is just this scaremongering, but of course, you know, he gleefully wants it to happen because, well, he could have a job in perpetuity, okay? I mean, The cottage industry known as Russian aggression.
Right. No, I think so. And I think that if I were Boris Johnson, I was thinking of a political comeback. I would think, hey, well, if there's a war, war between Russia and NATO, then I would imagine there would be a coalition government formed, and Johnson would be brought back. Johnson will be the defense secretary or whatever. Maybe he'd be the foreign secretary. He'd be part of a coalition government.
Hey, maybe he'd bring David Cameron back with him.
I'm sure David Cameron. Yeah, I'm back.
And Liz, there's hope for you. You'll be over at the Exchequer.
Yes, I guess Liz who lost her seat in the last election. They would have to bung her in the House of Lords like they did with David Cameron. They wanted to bring David Cameron into the government, but he didn't have a constituency, so they had to elevate him to the House of Lords, and so he became Lord David Cameron, and then he could be foreign secretary. So they have to make her Dame Liz Truss.
Is it Lord S? Is it Lordess? Or is she? I mean,
no, I think she'll be Dame Liz Truss.
Dame.
Dame. D-A-M-E. Yeah, Dame.
Not Dame.
Yeah, not Dame in a respectable, not the derogatory use of the word dames.
How going to be different with Liz Truss?
And then we would probably see escalation in the South China Seas and in the Middle East. This is the again standard scaremongering. We would see a general escalation of global tension and violence because a Ukrainian defeat and a victory for Putin would be not only a tragedy for a young, brave, and beautiful country, it would mean the global collapse of Western credibility. Oh, that was good. It's a long time since that word was used, the credibility. I remember Henry Kissinger, talked about credibility, American credibility is on the line. He would always be talking about the credibility, we must maintain our credibility.
What happened, George?
Yeah, that's right. And I remember, he said this when I think he was talking to de Gaulle about Vietnam, and de Gaulle, I think, asked Kissinger, why are you continuing this fight in Vietnam? Because of the loss of credibility. And then de Gaulle thought of it and said, credibility where? And says, well, in the Middle East. And then de Gaulle said, well, I would have thought it's more your enemies that have no credibility in the Middle East. This was just after the '67 war. But the point is that Kissinger had difficulties. He asked a very obvious question, like, credibility where? Where are you going to lose this credibility? Well, in the Middle East. Well, you haven't lost any credibility in the Middle East. But
if it gets down to Western credibility, there's one way to start. I mean, I know with the genocide in Gaza, I don't know if this can be recovered, but I mean, if we put that aside here, credibility in the context that Johnson and Kissinger were mentioning it, to say, hey, the Russians, they got a point. They are worried about their security. So how can we secure our security and respect their security? Now, that's being an adult in the room.
Right.
But George and I have been through countless numbers of articles just like this,
yep.
And they never mention the most obvious point that there's mutual.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. But this argument about credibility always kind of, assumes one thing, which is that America has this obligation to make these foolish commitments, foolish promises, and then when you're not able to deliver on your foolish commitments and the foolish promises, then you have to continue because otherwise you lose credibility. Well, the obvious answer was don't make foolish commitments, don't make foolish promises, and then your credibility is not going to be on the line. But it's always that. They always bring this out. Well, we have to do something because otherwise we lose credibility.
Well, one thing is for sure, the farce known as the domino theory lives on forever.
Yep, okay. Absolutely. And then Johnson goes on, it would mean the demolition of all our claims to be willing to stand up for freedom or democracy. Who the hell believes this crap? Well, who? You think people in India, Modi is thinking, hey, you've made all these commitments to stand up for freedom and democracy. You're not doing it. That's a real problem. You've lost credibility with me. I mean, it's like, this is such vacuous, absolutely
Well, I
ridiculous
mean,
assertion.
and it shows a obvious ignorance and arrogance here. Well, then why did you overthrow the democratically elected government in Ukraine in February of 2024?
Exactly.
And after that, the forced closure of any opposition party and no freedom of speech, and you have
Yeah.
ubiquitous security force. Is that the freedom of democracy you're talking about?
That's
And then
exactly
you have
right.
a man sitting in Kiev where his mandate expired in May.
That's exactly. And of course, the UK Prime Minister at the time was David Cameron. And so, yeah, it was the Cameron who then became Foreign Secretary. It's the same Cameron who was gleeful, positively gleeful and giddy with excitement after the overthrow of Yanukovych. And then they rushed to recognize the coup leaders as the legitimate government in Kiev. Above all, a defeat for Ukraine would be, let us not mince our words, a catastrophic defeat for NATO, the explosion of the aura of NATO invincibility that has helped to keep us, the British, safe for the past 80 years. This is this utter vacuous twaddle.
But there's a kernel of truth in that, because NATO, because of what George said, is making these ridiculous promises, it found itself in painted into a corner. I mean, you reap what you sow, and this is what's happened here. NATO is only to blame for this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It cannot and must not happen. So for heaven's sake, let's snap out of this trance-like state and stop muttering about escalation as an excuse for vacillation.
It's really interesting that he would say muttering, because he mutters more than he talks.
He mutters, oh, and again, you remember when he was talking about how, we have to bring back conscription in the UK, and he was very enthusiastic because some British generals are, oh yeah, we're facing such dire threats, we're to bring back conscription. He was really gung for, and then you look at him, you look at this slob who had never done any military service, and he thought this was all very funny, oh, Corporal Johnson reporting for duty, and then you look at him, and there's, oh, excuse for vacillation. Well, by the state of your physique, you're not going to be called up anyway. So, enjoy your big lunches and your port and your wine and so on. But again, other people will be called up. Other people will get killed. Largely those very working class Brits that you have such contempt for, as has Starmer, they're the ones who are going to be called up and who have to do the fighting and dying. So you, Johnson, will still go on enjoying your nice, lovely life in London. We need to get serious and get real. And the first step to sanity is to understand that there is no honorable compromise to be made with Putin. And again, it's amazing. I think we talked about it this morning. Well, that wasn't the view that all Western leaders had about Putin for many years. They thought Putin was a good, reliable partner. They didn't do anything to make sure that they kept him on side and to maintain their partnership. But there was a reason why he got invited to Crawford, Texas, to spend time with George W. Bush. He got to meet the Queen. He had a meeting with the Queen. I think tea with the Queen. So this whole no honorable compromise was made with Putin. Well, you had that opportunity for many years when you thought Putin was a partner that you could do business with. We must abandon any idea that the Ukrainians will do a deal. We must abandon any idea that the Ukrainians will do a deal. In other words, Ukrainians, you will not be doing a deal. No deal for you.
Well, I mean, Zelensky might make a deal if he can guarantee his personal safety, but he can't do that.
No.
Okay.
No, he can't. They won't trade land for peace, and I make sure of that. They have fought for too long.
Yeah. But those that are listening, that wasn't in the text.
Okay? That wasn't in the text. They have fought for too long. They've suffered too much. Their hatred for Putin, and now I'm afraid the Russian aggressor as a whole burns with such incandescence that no Ukrainian leader could do such a deal and remain in office. Yes, the Ukrainians are tired, and of course there are many who want the war to be over, but their will to fight is undiminished, and it feels to me that the country would collapse into anarchy and civil war rather than submit to partition.
Well, because of people like Boris Johnson, the country will eventually collapse into anarchy and civil war. You heard it here. Okay.
But the interesting again is the partition, because again, this isn't really a partition in the way that, let's say, we thought about India, where you had the Hindus and the Muslims really hated one another at that moment. You're still talking about Russia and Ukraine. I mean, still, essentially, they were one people. I mean, to talk about partition as if really you had people who are really very different. So they're not that different, but he makes this as this absolutely monstrous thing. Well, it really isn't. I mean, it had been a part of the Russian Empire. Well, there'd been one people within the Russian Empire. There'd also been one people in the Soviet era. So this whole thing about this partition as this nightmare that we can't possibly have is again his own warmongering, because again he's everything he's saying is, don't you even think about it, don't plan on any kind of a deal, no deal, we won't support you, which is what Johnson said at that time. We will not support you if you try to do a deal.
And using the word partition here, George is absolutely right. From the Russian perspective, and the people living in Russians living in eastern Ukraine, they don't think in terms of partition. They think in terms of no longer being the target of violence by the people in Kiev and their backers in the West. Okay, they are very happy not to face that prospect again. They won't think of it as a partition whatsoever. They will think it is a part of returning home.
Right. That's right. But again, this is the classic kind of Western. The Western, they're very good at fighting proxy wars, and they're very good at stirring up hatreds. I mean, that absolutely, what Johnson's doing here is stirring up hatred. Hate these people, really hate them. Absolutely never accept any kind of a partition, never accept actually living with them, working with them, just always keep focus on your hatred. Absolutely, they did I mean, of course, Hitler was the master at this. I mean, the Germans were masters. The British and the Americans are kind of following in the footsteps of the Germans. You make sure that all these people actually hate one another, and then you can divide and rule.
But it's one of the oddities about this conflict here. You have, as a result of the coup in February 2014, you had the worst, most radical elements of Ukrainian political society come to the fore. They're not large in numbers, but their sway is much bigger than their numbers. And these same people, they loathe Russians.
Right.
They can't stand hearing the Russian language, which Ukrainian has so many Russian words. It's absurd. But anyway, these radicals that have been empowered by the West, they hate the people in eastern Ukraine. So why do you want that part of Ukraine? I mean, it's alien to you. Don't you want to cleanse yourself of them? Don't you want to say, be done with them? We don't, but it doesn't make any sense here.
That's a very good
power of your youth for a group of people that you loathe and you want to destroy.
Right. Yeah. No.
George, it doesn't work the other way around. Maybe it's different now after 10 years of conflict, but the people of the Donbass are saying, just leave us alone. Okay, that's all.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, I assume that those people in the West, they want the Donbass, but they want to cleanse it, kick out all the people who are actually living there, and just, help themselves to the land and the resources, but they don't want the Russians who are living there. So it's just
and as George and I have pointed out many times, if you look at before, let's say January 2014, just to keep it clean, is that where was the economic strength of Ukraine? In the East. Where were most of the financial transactions on? In the East. Where were most of the resources? In the East, okay? All in the East.
Right. No, that's right. That's right. We need to stop this pathetic game of grandmother's footsteps with Putin. Do you know this expression, grandmother's footsteps? Yeah. I guess it's like a grandmother dancing, I don't know what grandmothers probably
I just think grandmothers walk with very small steps.
Yeah, maybe that's so. Yeah. We need to end the delays. We need to drop the mantra that we are with Ukraine for as long as it takes, which now makes Ukrainians groan. We need to get it done and get it won. We are going to do this.
We?
We. Now I have to go to my cocktail party.
Have
Usually
you
there's about 2
ordered
cocktail parties every night.
You ordered for a uniform? Have you signed up? Who's
Yes,
we?
that's right. Corporal Johnson reporting for duty. Now I got to get a pair of pants into which I can fit. We need to show that we are serious first by giving the Ukrainians the right to use the weapons they already possess. It is mad and cruel to insist that they try to protect themselves against bombardments with one hand tied behind their backs. Second, we need to produce a package of loans on the scale of Lend-Lease, $500 billion, as suggested by Pompeo, or even $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Imagine what he's really saying here. First of all, who's going to pay for this trillion? I mean, you're going to just hit taxpayers in Britain, in America. They're going to fork over $1 trillion for Ukraine. So again, somebody else is going to be paying for this. But again, get it done, get it won. How do you defeat a country that's 4 times your size and has nuclear weapons? I mean, it cannot happen. I mean, he keeps talking about how you're going to win this or win that. Yeah, you can defeat Serbia, you can defeat Panama, you can defeat Iraq. How do you defeat Russia? I mean, in this bluster, it just makes absolutely no sense. It just.
Well, I mean, these type of people, they think it's a good idea, and since it's a good idea, it's doable. Well, that's just flawed geopolitics. Okay,
Right.
It doesn't the realities on the ground. Okay, how he envisions. So what is this $500 billion? What is this trillion? How is that going to turn the trick here?
Exactly. Where's $1 trillion? That's $1,000 billion. That is a lot of money. That is an awful lot of money. And again, how's that going to do anything? But
well, I'm sure the people in Kiev are saying, "Can we have that in small bills, please?"
The irony of it, of course, is that money will be spent in no time. It's all they start dividing it up very quickly. Chunk, chunk, chunk. Oh, it's gone.
But did Ross Perot said that sucking sound?
Oh yeah, the big sucking sound. Yeah.
Who knew you could spend $1 trillion so easily? Who knew?
Third, and most important of all, we need to end the ambiguity that has dogged Ukraine since the end of the Cold War and give final institutional expression to the destiny the Ukrainian people have chosen. We need to get Ukraine into NATO now, and I mean now. So again, we need to do it. And again, who is this? Again, NATO is supposed to be 32 member states. Again, many of them will say fine because they don't have to do anything about it. But some are going to have, trepidations about it. The Germans, I think, will have quite a lot of trepidations about getting Ukraine into NATO, let alone Hungary and Slovakia and so on. But he just says, I mean, now, just do it now. But again, the thing that, you can see from this Johnson is that this reckless gamble. And then, of course, if, Russia calls your bluff, and inevitably is going to call your bluff, then, hey, we have to go to war because otherwise our credibility is on the line. We can't just simply back down now. Our credibility is on the line. That's the whole point of keep saying credibility. Well, boom, hey, look, I mean, we got to, look what we've done. We can't just simply walk away. Otherwise, we've been humiliated. So, we have to keep going.
Yep.
This man was prime minister. I mean, this is the level of thinking of a man who was actually prime minister.
But it's called the fallacy of the sunk. What is it? We've invested so much now we can't turn back.
So exactly. And then there is a way of doing this. We could invite Ukraine to join before the war is even over. Again, we talked about how is that compatible with NATO treaty, but okay. That is because we could extend the Article 5 security guarantee to all Ukrainian territory currently controlled by Ukraine, while reaffirming the absolute right of the Ukrainians to the whole of their 1991 nation.
You didn't read it, but I find this very interesting, you know, or at the end of this fighting season. Okay. It's very odd, you know. I mean, he's not a military man, you know.
It's interesting because what he's suggesting here, I mean, that's that guy. You're absolutely right to pick that up. Is saying, okay, well, you know, maybe we're going to come to some. There will be some sort of a ceasefire or something, and then we're going to start it up again. You know, in a couple 2-3 years time, which is what we've always assumed was the NATO thinking, that if there is some kind of an agreement, you know, armistice or ceasefire agreement, then you're going to start it up in a few years.
You know, let's say the obvious for everyone. If Ukraine becomes part of NATO now, then Russia and Ukraine and NATO are at war.
Yeah.
Now think about what that means.
Right.
You think the Russians are going to wait and say, "Oh, let's see what they're going to do"? No, they're not.
Right. No, it would make no sense. It would make no sense for them to wait. We could protect most of Ukraine while simultaneously supporting the Ukrainian right to recapture the rest. So protecting. So you're saying essentially you're planning on going to war. I mean, that's already saying we could protect most of Ukraine. Essentially, we're going to war. We're going to be directly involved in a war with Russia. I mean, you know, so he isn't even saying, which I think previously had said whoever was it, that Rasmussen, the former NATO Secretary General, who was saying this, but he at least thought that, well, at least you'd have to come to some kind of a ceasefire, an armistice, before we get the rest of Ukraine into NATO. He doesn't even want that. He wants to get NATO in get Ukraine into NATO before there's a ceasefire. He said,
so Boris, so we could protect most of Ukraine. I have no idea what that means.
No.
What happens if a weapons depot in the suburb of Kiev is destroyed? Is that most of Ukraine in your mind?
But you're right. If they do attack a weapons depot near Kiev, that means NATO is involved in a war. I mean, at least according to Johnson's logic, that means NATO has to go to war because that's NATO territory that you've attacked. Then attack on one is, you know, attack on all. I mean, unless you're going to say, well, yeah, but Article 5 doesn't really mean anything. But that's not what Johnson is saying.
Well, but see, you're absolutely right, because you're being asked the question, what does Article 5 mean? Does it mean anything? Or is it just at the moment you decide it means something? Okay. That is, you know, we've talked a lot about Article 5 here. He just kind of brushes it aside.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Yeah. We could extend the Article 5 security guarantee. Now, when you say security guarantee, that means that you're ready to go to war. I mean, that's all the security guarantee means. It's a guarantee. It's not like, which is what Article 5 says, hey, we will engage in consultation and decide what each and every member state will do to help. But he's saying, no, it's a security guarantee, which of course it isn't, but he's saying it is. We could protect most of Ukraine. So we would protect. So in other words, we're going to be at war with Russia. We could protect most of Ukraine while simultaneously supporting the Ukrainian right to recapture the rest. And then, of course, if Ukraine does go about recapturing the rest, then what NATO is going to go with to support Ukrainian attempt to recapture the rest. This is good thinking. Good thinking, Johnson. There is plenty of scope within NATO treaty to do this. See Article 6, which specifies that countries can be members even if security guarantee does not apply to all of their internationally recognized territories.
Okay, I'm going to have to. I haven't read Article 6 recently. All I can say, given the sway of this article, I don't think Boris Johnson.
I don't think that's what it says there. I mean, but yeah.
I'm sorry, everybody. I wish it had it in front of me. I don't want to stop and look at it right now.
Right.
But I tend to think he has a very peculiar interpretation of that.
I think so. Yeah. We should do it in the next few months because this is the single biggest step we can take to bring this hideous war to an end. By getting Ukraine into NATO, we would send the crucial message to the Kremlin, the one Russians really need to hear. Why would the Kremlin stop the war once Ukraine is in NATO? I mean, I sense.
But George, from the Russian perspective, they're already fighting NATO.
Exactly. I don't understand. Whoa, we got to stop. Why would they do that? I mean, that doesn't it doesn't really make a great deal of sense. The message is, that's it. It's over. You don't have an empire anymore. You don't have a near abroad or a sphere of influence. You don't have the right to tell the Ukrainians what to do any more than we British have the right to tell our former colonies what to do. It is time for Putin to understand that Russia can have a happy and glorious future, but like Rome and like Britain, the Russians have decisively joined the ranks of the post-imperial powers, and a good thing too. Again, not talking about post-imperial powers, but I mean, the issue is your threats to your security, NATO on your border, NATO missiles on your borders. It's nothing to do with, incorporating with your empire. There was never the issue of getting Ukraine into some sort of a revived Russian empire or revived Soviet Union. That was never the issue. And Johnson is deliberately confusing issues. It's exactly the same as the Americans insisting that we don't actually have military bases, anyone else having military bases in our sphere of influence, namely in the Western Hemisphere. You would know, you don't know. Russia doesn't have military bases in Cuba. Russia doesn't station missiles in Cuba or in any hostile power station missiles anywhere near our territory. That's all the issue is, and that was what Russia's issue was. So he's deliberately confusing things by talking about colonies and empires and so on. And can anything like this happen? It certainly can, but it depends on us, on NATO, above all on America. It means that we would all have to commit to the defense of Ukrainian territory. We would all have to commit to the defense of that Ukrainian territory. And of course, that will mean anxiety and resistance. And then Pentagon strategists will point at the map, the sheer size of Ukraine, and they will dwell on the risk and the expense. Well, as I say, I believe a peaceful Ukraine will be in a position to meet the expense. Really. As for the risk, it is all the other way. The risk is that we continue with the ambiguity and indecision over the future of Ukraine that has led to the worst war in Europe in my lifetime. To adapt St. Paul, NATO membership for Ukraine will bring faith, hope, and clarity. And the greatest of these is clarity. NATO membership means clarity on borders, clarity on governance, clarity for Russia and Ukraine alike. And with clarity comes peace and stability.
Just the opposite. This is absurd. You bring in Ukraine into NATO now, and you have anything but peace and stability and clarity, because what the hell is going to happen then? He doesn't say.
No, that's and that's really the interesting thing is that we've had what the Russians have said. This is what's unacceptable to us. Why would he think that it would suddenly be acceptable to Russia, particularly after it's made already so many sacrifices? So, oh, okay, well, yeah, we said that we wouldn't accept Ukraine in NATO. Well, now we decided we will accept it. Okay, fine. Deal's done. We're good. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. But it's so reckless. It's so frivolous to go around writing these sorts of articles in The Spectator, which is quite a respectable magazine. Johnson's a former prime minister, and you're talking in this way about World War III and just assuring the public nothing to worry about here. Nothing.
And it's people like Boris Johnson that makes Timothy Garton-Ash look smart. That's how sad. Okay? That's how sad it is.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Johnson is just even more loony than anything Garton-Ash said. But that's,
did they say at the end of the article who's paying him right now? Who's payrolling him to?
That's a good.
They really should do that, George.
They really should. Now he's a columnist at the Daily Mail. Obviously, he makes a lot of money there, but he must be living on something else. He's making all these trips to the United States, urging the Republicans, stop being, so difficult, just sign off already on giving Ukraine everything at once. And you think, why is he doing this? I mean, there has to be an angle there. He's not just, going on these trips to badger Republicans if there isn't some, monetary, pecuniary gains that he's after. That's not who Johnson is. Johnson is not, he's not someone who believes anything except the color of money. So obviously that's where it is. It's same with Rasmussen and the rest of these lobbyists.
Yeah, well, at least Stoltenberg is going to go to the bank, literally.
So. looting the Norwegian central bank.
George and I, history is very important to us, and we reflect upon it every time we speak, one way or another. But this is such a stupid man's understanding of history. It is even to the point of ahistorical. I mean, you can always, in these articles, you always feel it, particularly with the Brits. It's just Munich. Everything is Munich. Everything is
right.
Munich.
Yeah.
Always that way.
It
Which
is.
Munich happened in 1938. And
1938, exactly. And
that's it. Okay.
Exactly. You cannot apply it to any other situation, and by doing so is being deeply dishonest. But I think that's part of it. But I do think there's also the feeling. There's always been that feeling about the British that that which Harold Macmillan famously said, we are the Greece to their Rome. So America's the Rome, they're the ones with the muscle, the sword, and we are Greece. We add wisdom, philosophy, experience, and we'll guide them. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is also money. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in this lobbying for more and more arms to be sent to Ukraine. I think they're all getting a piece of the action by doing.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but George and I used to talk about the Afghan grift, and at the time during that 20-year span, it seemed huge. It's being dwarfed right now by what the Ukraine scam. It's being dwarfed.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it was something, I think 2 trillion altogether, but that was over 20 years.
It was something like
about 2 trillion over 20 years. Now, this has been only going on since, let's say we start February 2024. So it's already, it's already a lot of money. I mean, I know, hard to know exactly how much it is. I think they're deliberately underestimating how much has been spent. It's going to be 2 trillion quite quickly. It's going to add up to those sums.
And what did they get for it, George?
Yeah.
What did they get for it?
Nothing.
Well, a lot of people bought a new house in the Hamptons, that's for sure. And probably Zelensky probably bought one in the Hamptons. Everybody else does. Okay.
That's right. But it's an interesting issue that why, well, I mean, that's of course a big subject, but again, why taxpayers tolerate this? It's their money. It's your money. Your hard-earned money is taken by government and then pissed away on projects that give you no benefits whatsoever, and taxpayers tolerate this. Again,
Well, I mean, did taxpayers know that Ukrainian teachers are being paid by American taxpayers?
Right.
Okay? I mean, it's so many. I mean, Israel has universal health care. The U.S. helps subsidize it. What about Americans? Do they have?
Forget that. Yeah. Exactly. And as we've mentioned with in Britain, where Keir Starmer announces, well, we've got to tighten our belts and there'll be no winter fuel allowance for the elderly because we just can't afford it anymore. We've got a 22 billion pound hole. We got to get out of this 22 billion pound hole. Well, but there's money for Ukraine. And we've got this 22 billion hole,
but I mean,
but there's money for Ukraine.
Okay, but let's say but Ukraine is a worthy cause. You haven't explained even that ridiculous article that Boris Johnson wrote or didn't write or had written for him, whatever. It doesn't make a compelling argument.
Right.
Okay.
No.
And what's the worst thing? This is something that really bothers me the most. Is that how do we bring peace and security back? It's never addressed.
No.
It's never addressed.
No.
It's how we can beat those dastardly Russians. That's what it's all about.
Right. Exactly. And we have to do it because otherwise Putin will win. So it becomes a kind of a circular argument we have to win, because if we don't win, then Putin wins. And then that's it. And then, of course, but you never decide, well, what is winning? What exactly is that? Well, that you never leave. Or we just winning. It means not allowing Putin to win, and that pretty much is actually determines the strategy, which is basically just keep the war going, because we have to prevent Putin from winning. They don't have any other goal in mind other than to prevent Russia from winning.
Meanwhile, carnage continues.
Yeah.
The carnage continues. It's the they never give the coverage of it. How much do you see? War correspondents in a hotel in Kiev, okay, maybe they'll put on a helmet or something like that with a microphone. Do they see the carnage? No, the Ukrainian authorities don't want you to see it at all. Now, I mentioned in the past these Telegram channels where it's very, very graphic, and I have to admit to all of you, I just stroll very quickly. I don't really need to see it. Okay,
No, that's all terrible stuff.
It degrades you by looking at that. Okay, but there's no comprehensive goal here. How to bring peace back to Europe. These people, it's not even secondary. It's not even on the agenda.
No, exactly. That's it. So, that's why these two articles are absolutely, redolent. There are
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Exactly, and there are many such articles, which is the last thing we want is any kind of a peaceful settlement. That's all. And anyone who talks about let's bring this war to an end is a wimp, a coward, a Neville Chamberlain, a thoroughly contemptible figure. The good people, the moral people, are the ones who want to keep the carnage going.
Well, we've talked about this before. In 1956, we had a British prime minister who saw what was going on in the Suez Canal, and that's Munich all over again.
Yeah.
And because he misinterpreted it, it became a disaster, absolute catastrophic disaster. So when you see history through a certain prism,
yeah,
you don't see all the variables, you don't see the logic, you don't see how all the pieces are moving. And that's why they put this prism in front of their head and think it's going to come out the same way it was before. Well, right. No historian worth his or her salt would ever.
No, that's right. But it's a stupid, primitive way of thinking, and that's how you can scare the public. Hey, if we give Hitler what he wants, then terrible things are going to happen, and so we can't do it. I mean, it's both immoral and really dangerous. But it's, of course, many people just don't really know much about Munich. In fact, almost no one knows anything about Munich. But you can keep doing this. Well, Hitler's a really bad guy, and so this is really about giving Hitler everything he wants. Oh, I don't want to give Hitler everything he wants. Good, then you can sign up for this stupid war, and that's the trick. That's the lie. That's the deceit of how they can keep these wars going.
Yeah. And as George and I have commented here, NATO is at war with Russia. Right. Russia has not decisively reacted to that yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. We don't get directly involved. We don't want to. We're not a combatant. You right. are. You're in Russian territory in Kursk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, in Kursk of all places. Okay, which is very meaningful.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right. Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is where we are, and you have these intellectual lightweights like Boris Johnson. Oh no, it's all fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. You should very much worry. Yeah. Scott Winter has an interesting piece at Consortium News. I think it's titled 72 Minutes, and he goes through a possible scenario when the first missile starts fired. Right. We've all got about 72 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay?
Yeah. That's how serious it is. Yeah. All right, this is our Sunday wrap. We have a live stream tomorrow.
Live stream tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time. Please join us. Come with comments, criticisms, ideas, suggestions, opinions. Everything is welcome. We really like answering your questions. So if you've got a number of questions, then just write them out, on the board so that we can address them. We always like lots of questions. And then I do my solo live stream on Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Now I see Buddy has shown up and says, look, I'm getting tired of this tip jar situation, and I'm not going to tolerate this for much longer. So if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them in his tip jar. All the money goes to them. I mean, there's nothing in it for any of us other than them, and so they're getting quite annoyed. Buddy thinks I'm doing all the work here, and I don't get remunerated. So please, if you have some extra money lying around, put it in the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support.
Get the coins in your cushions.
Exactly. Yeah, excellent. Like, behind the sofa, anything lying around. So, so we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and we'll get Buddy into a slightly more positive frame of mind, which is never an easy task. So if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.